I'm Lucille. In the dimly lit hallway of the grand Ravenswood Manor, the air thick with tension, I stood with my heart in my throat. A gunshot had just shattered the silence, and the man named Victor, holding a gun, now lay crumpled on the floor. Behind him, Mrs. Thompson, the loyal and vigilant housekeeper, stood pale but fierce, a solid brass candlestick in her hand, its impact darkening the metal. As I caught Mr. Alexander, the frail but kind master of the manor, just as his knees gave way, I was thrust back into a series of events that had led me to this terrifying moment. My life had once been a simple one, living in a small apartment in the rundown part of the city with my parents. My mother, Emily, had always been the heart of our family, full of warmth and love, but a long-term illness had taken a toll on her. Her body was weak, and every day was a struggle with pain. My father, George, was a hard-working man, but his meager income was barely enough to cover the basic expenses, let alone the mounting medical bills. One day, as rain lashed against the smudged windows of our apartment, my father came home looking ashen. The weight of the world seemed to be on his shoulders. He had taken out a loan 3 months ago from a shady lender to pay for my mother's treatments. The lender's men had come back, demanding not only the principal but also a hefty amount of interest. We had a week to pay back a sum of $100,000, a mountain of debt that we had no hope of ever gathering. My mother, racked with guilt, thought it was all her fault for pressuring my father to take the loan. The atmosphere in our little apartment was suffocating. The old wall clock in the hallway ticked relentlessly, a constant reminder of the approaching deadline. Then, my father revealed the alternative the lender had offered. The man who ran the lending outfit had seen me months ago when he came to check on the apartment and remembered me. If I agreed to marry Mr. Alexander, a wealthy but ailing man in his 60s, the debt would be wiped out. I was in shock. The idea of marrying a stranger, a man old enough to be my grandfather, was beyond my comprehension. My mother was vehemently against it, saying I was not a bargaining chip. But the harsh reality was that without a way to pay the debt, we would lose our apartment, and my mother's treatments would stop. She wouldn't survive the winter without proper care. After a long, sleepless night, I made the agonizing decision. I would sacrifice my own happiness to save my family. The next morning, a sleek black car arrived outside our apartment building. As I hesitantly climbed inside, I took one last look at the peeling paint, rusted stair rails, and the smell of damp concrete, knowing that my life was about to change forever. As we drove away, the landscape transformed. The poor neighborhoods gave way to clean sidewalks, sprawling lawns, and quiet streets lined with old-growth trees. Ravenswood Manor loomed at the end of a long, winding driveway. Its imposing stone facade was shaded by towering oaks, making it seem like a relic from another era. Inside the manor, the air was cold and still, as if all the warmth had been drained away. Mr. Alexander was waiting for me at the bottom of the staircase. He was tall but stooped, his body frail, and he leaned on a cane for support. An oxygen cannula was attached to his face. Despite his obvious fragility, there was a kindness in his eyes. Our wedding the next afternoon was a far cry from what I had ever imagined. A clerk from the local registry office arrived with a briefcase full of documents. There was no music, no decorations, just a cold, legal transaction in the silent library of the manor. That night, in my assigned bedroom, I sat on the edge of the bed, feeling a sense of isolation. Mr. Alexander came in, looking more exhausted than ever. He disconnected his oxygen line and removed the mask. For the first time, I saw the full extent of his illness. His skin was paper-thin and translucent under the soft light, and surgical scars marked his neck. He assured me that he would never force anything on me. I realized then that he, too, was a prisoner in his own failing body and the cold walls of the manor. My peace was short-lived. One afternoon, a man named Richard, Mr. Alexander's older brother, arrived at the manor like a storm. He carried himself with an air of arrogance and cruelty. He mocked Mr. Alexander's condition and made hurtful remarks about his past relationships. He even cruelly mentioned the death of Mr. Alexander's daughter, saying she resented him before she died. That night, Richard returned, this time hinting at the importance of Mr. Alexander's will. He circled Mr. Alexander like a predator, saying that if Mr. Alexander died before revising the will, I would get nothing, and he would inherit everything. The threat hung heavy in the air, a dark cloud over our heads. I also met Victor, the manor's manager. He had a polished exterior, but there was something about him that made me uneasy. One night, unable to sleep, I heard angry voices coming from Mr. Alexander's study. Victor was arguing with Richard. Victor was angry because Richard had promised him a share of the inheritance once Mr. Alexander was taken care of, but Mr. Alexander was dragging his feet on signing the new will. Richard dismissed Victor's impatience, saying that Henry's weak heart meant a simple push would do the job, and nature would take its course. The realization that they were planning a premeditated murder sent a chill down my spine. I was trapped in the same house as these scheming men. Then, that fateful night, as I was helping Mr. Alexander back to his room, Victor emerged from the darkness, a gun in his hand. He declared that it was the night Mr. Alexander would take a tragic fall down the grand staircase. I instinctively stepped in front of Mr. Alexander, trying to reason with Victor. I offered to talk, to find a way to pay him what he wanted, but he was cold and unyielding. Just as he was about to pull the trigger, Mrs. Thompson, the ever-watchful housekeeper, struck him down with the candlestick. She had been suspicious of Victor and Richard's whispers for weeks and had called the police an hour ago, fearing that something terrible was about to happen. Within minutes, the manor was flooded with police officers. They retrieved footage from the security cameras that showed Victor rifling through Mr. Alexander's important documents and forging his signature. The police also learned that Mrs. Thompson's call had prevented a large transfer from Mr. Alexander's trust, which could have emptied it. Victor was arrested and would be charged with attempted murder, fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. Richard was also apprehended as he tried to flee through a side entrance. As winter melted into spring, the weight that had been pressing on my shoulders for months began to lift. The debt that had haunted my family was declared void, as the investigators traced it back to Victor's fraudulent financial manipulations. My mother's health began to improve as she received proper treatment again. Back at Ravenswood Manor, Mr. Alexander's recovery was a slow but steady process. Physical therapists visited regularly, and he gradually regained some strength. The manor itself began to change. Mrs. Thompson opened the windows, letting in fresh air and sunlight. The once cold rooms began to feel alive again. I stayed at the manor, not out of obligation, but because a connection had formed between Mr. Alexander and me. We would often walk through the garden together, and sometimes we would just sit in silence, finding comfort in each other's presence. Looking back on that terrifying night in the hallway, I realized that out of the darkness and despair, there had been a glimmer of hope. The danger had passed, and a new beginning had emerged. I had found a new family in Mr. Alexander and Mrs. Thompson, and the future, once so uncertain, now seemed full of possibilities.